Hello, and welcome back to the Chris Macpherson Show. Ready to rock and roll for another episode, looking across the broad sporting landscape, giving some insights, some opinion, and a whole lot of waffle in between. Looking forward to digging into some cricket, some AFL, and some football, bit of motorsport as well to cover your sporting lens. Let's get it started with the start of the summer. The cricket is upon us. The tests are not far away. And to pull apart the Border Gavaskar Trophy as we lead into this week's first test is none other than the host of the Third Man Up podcast. He's also a sports guru. There's a lot of things he is. Not many things he isn't. Brody Burrows, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again, Chris. Had a bowl last time and looking forward to being on again, mate.
I've undersold you as well, mate, in that intro. We're gonna dig into a bit of boxing. We might leave that to last because I know you've got strong views on that. So
Jeez.
We'll dig into that a little bit later on. But mate, in terms of the cricket, I don't know about you, but I'm certainly chomping at the bit. This Border Gavaskar Trophy, 5 tests for the first time in the history of the series. What's not to be pumped about?
Yeah, the white ball, it's been all right, but I think it's definitely been the entree to the main course of this. And the team that got rolled out for the white ball games is nothing that's going to be compared to the test series. And obviously, New Zealand coming off a big win over in India. I think if you look at it, it's probably one of the biggest upsets nearly in Test history. A 3-0 win over India in India, they're coming here with under so much pressure, and then Australia also coming in so much pressure with India. Also, I think winning the last 6-7 series against Australia. So.
Yeah, I think it's 6 out of the last 7, the last 4 straight, including 2 here in Australia. It's just, look, it hasn't been our run against them. The thing that I fear now, though, is if we beat them at home, our mates over the ditch are just going to be like, oh, that's cool, you beat them at home.
Yeah, and I think you look at India at the moment, and there's something about when India play Australia that, everyone's writing off Virat Kohli right now. And as an Australian, I'm so fearful of that because this is the one time that Virat's going to come out and just go absolute whack and make his mark on the series. But look, mate, coming in, there's so many storylines for both sides, and I'm really excited to dissect them here.
Yeah, looking forward to it. In terms of Virat, mate, I heard a very good line today, and it was someone talking about form is temporary, class is permanent. And I think he's one of the cricketers of the modern generation that embodies that as well as anyone. And I just hope they don't poke the bear. But we'll get into that in a moment. Let's start on the Aussie side of things. We've seen how the squad lines up. We know what we're looking at. It looks like McSweeney's going to be at the top. I know, mate, you're a South Australian and you've well and truly adopted him now. You'd be very happy with him in the side?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just goes to show that when you do get those chances in those Australia A games, and there's nothing like runs, I suppose, in the lead up to a test series. And Nathan McSweeney, he's not an official opener, but when he did get that chance, he just looked composed at the crease, and we all know he's got that leadership potential. He's done well this year, and he's just taking his game to a new level. He's not shuffling at the crease much anymore, and he's staying nice and still. And I think the thoughts that we need an attacking opening batter has gone out the window. Imagine Steve Smith and Marnus coming in now at the 30th over rather than coming in at the 4th over, and I think that is where we can really get a hold of this Indian side on home soil.
Yeah, they talk about McSweeney. He seems to have the right temperamental keys. He's very organised. He's a very structured batter. And at the end of the day, the piece, as much as facing Jasprit Bumrah is a bloody challenging task with a new ball, he's going to be without his normal sparring partner at the top of the bowling lineup, which is going to help. But the good thing for Nathan McSweeney, and the good thing, I guess, if you're an opener, and the perspective I think that you'd have to be viewing it from is it's going to be very consistent. If you bat at number 4, you can be coming in at 2 for none, or you can be coming in at 2 for 400. It's very consistent. You're going out there, and we know that Usman doesn't like to face the first ball. So realistically, you're facing up to the first ball. You're there from the go-get. I heard a Shane Watson conversation this week as well. He talked about the fact that he kind of went, well, I don't have to worry about anything because if I get out, there's still heaps of batters to come. Whereas if you're batting at 4, 5 or 6, there's not as many to come.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And Watto was always very good. It was either a decent score by Watto or out and using up a review in the second over. But another thing about Nathan McSweeney, I mean, he's been coming in number 3 for South Australia. And when you're coming in number 3 for South Australia, you're often in, on the second ball anyway. So he's definitely got experience batting in the first over.
Well, we won't dig into that too much. The Sheffield Shield recently hasn't been great for everyone. New South Wales, very high and mighty at the moment. But anyway, mate, in terms of while we're talking batting order, and the team for Australia. Do we see any other surprises, or do you think it's going to be very much to script for the remainder of the other 10 spots for the opening test in Perth?
Yeah, I think for the opening test in Perth, it's pretty well stock standard. You could just about pencil it in now, and really excited to see how Steve Smith goes this summer. Obviously, there's been so much spoken about his drop off in form, but when you go back and look at it, I mean, he's still averaging close to 40, which you would take from most batters around the world. I mean, but everyone's comparing this to the Steve Smith that was just scoring, average 90 for a couple of years there, and I think we got to think that if Steve Smith can, I suppose, come in now, like we talked about earlier, at that 30th over, we could see that average, go back up to astronomical levels. And really excited to see him, and hopefully Marnus can return to form as well. He's one that's actually getting talked about who could be in the firing line, maybe at the end of the series if he has another disappointing one.
It's going to be an interesting one. I've heard a few things tossed around. I don't think we'll see any changes for Perth, but obviously Inglis has been included in the squad, and based on his form at the moment, he can certainly hold his own just as a batsman. I don't think he's purely there as a reserve keeper. I think that's his primary role, certainly, and obviously, he's a straight slot in. The other thing that's been talked about as well is depending on what's happening around our bowling needs, etc. The form that Carey's in, do they potentially bring him up to 6 if we need some more bowling? And you've got the likes of Nisa floating around as well. I mean, we've seen the runs that he can get as well. I mean, he's genuinely in the all-rounder conversation now, but probably an all-rounder that would bat at 7. I think we've got a couple of questions over, that opening spot at the moment until we get some consistency. I think we've got some positive options if we want to change up the look and maybe not just go with the very traditional Australian, lineup of 5 batters, a batting all-rounder, a wicket-keeper, and then 4 bowlers.
Yeah, I think also having Mitch Marsh in that squad who can also, he can squeeze at least, maybe 10 overs if it is maybe a 100 over batting innings. You could always bank on 10 overs from Mitch Marsh if you did want to go that route. Travis Head, I think he's a severely underbowled off spin if it is a turning wicket. And Nathan McSweeney can also pitch in for some more than handy off spin as well. So bringing him in, I think you could probably add an extra batter rather than bring up an extra bowler, because I'm always against a strong bowling lineup, which India is always known to have. I mean, look at the reserve net bowler side that they brought over and destroyed us with last time. I'd always just definitely pack it with batters. And I mean, when you've got Mitch Starc, Josh Hazlewood, and Pat Cummins steaming in from one end, you're always going to be a chance to get 10 wickets pretty quickly.
The one question I do have, Cameron Green, obviously out of the side, injured. I think we lose something from him in terms of he's that one that can come in and bowl that sort of aggressive, come in and bowl us, a dozen to 18 short balls that keep people on their toes. That's going to mean a shift from a Hoff, a Josh Hazlewood or a Pat Cummins, I think, which might then, it'll just be interesting to see. You touched on Mitch Marsh. We know he hasn't been bowling as much of late due to some health pieces. So that might be an interesting thing, as you said, as to how they manage that. McSweeney might get some overs in, maybe Big Man off the long run. We know.
Oh, no.
Bowling
Surely not.
But I think that's something to see how that evolves as well. And that'll be an interesting question if we need someone to sort of get in that short, sharp and heavy business for, at midway through to sort of rattle some batters.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Cameron Green, and his work in the gully is nothing short of extraordinary. Like the amount of catches he takes, where it'd be half chances for most people, when you can nearly bank on if it's anywhere near Cameron Green, he's going to take it. And the amount of runs he stops there too, and he just has a knack of when he does get given the ball of maybe taking that quick wicket of a batter who has been set for a while, but just putting it on that awkward length and having that awkward bounce. So. Yeah, for me, I just think this Indian batting lineup is looking as shaky as it's ever been for a long time, really. And then coming to an Australian, I really hope the Perth wicket is green and bouncy, and it just sends shockwaves through the system early. I think India, when they last come with Ravi Shastri as coach, they embraced this, this Australian lifestyle, the Australian fans, the Indian fans in Australia. Now they've come here and they've actually, under Gautam Gambhir, actually shut it off. And, you can't watch their training sessions. And I think it's going to go the other way towards them. I think they're coming in with more pressure on them than ever. And if you talk to if you listen to a lot of the Indian commentators, they're actually saying India is usually where you feel your pressure, because there's so much pressure back in India. And if you're putting this pressure on an away series, they don't see it going well for them.
It's certainly going to be interesting. Speaking of pressure on them, we know they're going to be without their skipper as well as one of their other top order batters. So Sharma and Shubman Gill both out for the first test. It looks like Jasprit Bumrah will be the captain. I can't remember the last time an Australian home test had two fast bowlers as the captains, first of all.
Yeah, mate, that's a great point. I can't think of that either. Another fella I can't wait to see in this series, Rishabh Pant. His his commentary behind the stumps, his ability to just throw out some absolute rubbish is second to none in the cricketing world. And we saw him and Dave Warner a few years ago, and I just can't wait to see what he has to say to Nathan McSweeney for his first test. I think it's going to be hilarious.
I can imagine if Marnus is in for a long stint batting, that could be absolutely ear-bleeding conversation. Those two. Jeez, wow.
Some mics are going off.
It is indeed. So, yeah, a big hole there at the top of the order, obviously, for India, which doesn't help their cause. It puts a bit more pressure, I think, on the likes of Kohli. But Pant, yeah, as you say, one of the characters, and we also know, we've seen what he can do. He can take a game away from us as well. He backs up his talk. So, really looking forward to this. It's exciting. It's a 5-test series. We played so many 4-test series. I think the last 3 or 4 series have been decided 2-1. So really looking forward to it being a 5-test match series. I'm going to go the Aussies to get it done 3-1. I'm confident. I like what we've got on offer. If our batting can fire, I think Steve Smith's ready to go. I think Marnus is going to follow. I just feel Smith's form, if it picks back up, Marnus will be along for the ride and be wanting to get into it. So, yeah, really looking forward to how this all shapes up. But, mate, as we go to air on Thursday night, it's only one more sleep.
Oh, no, I'm so excited. So I've already got my members' tickets for the day-night test when it comes to Adelaide. And, I just simply can't wait. Australia and India, you know the atmosphere. It's like a party atmosphere. The Indian fans are phenomenal when they do come and watch Australian cricket. I mean, it sounds like an Indian home game sometimes, and it's absolutely fantastic. And these two, no matter where they are, no matter the form going in, you know it's always going to be a tight battle. And I'm going Australia 4-0 for what it is. I think there'll be one draw or probably a washout at some stage, mate. But yeah, I'm going a 4-0 sweep by Australia.
I'm kind of selfishly hoping that it's 2-1 when it gets to Sydney and I'm there day one and getting amongst it. And, really it's up for grabs. But, in traditional Sydney way, it'll probably be on the line and then get rained out. But anyway, I didn't say that. But, mate, I can't wait. Looking forward to it. I think there's going to be lots of runs. What's not to like? You've got one of the best batters or two of the best batters of all time, both looking for some form in Steve Smith and Virat Kohli. One of the best pace bowlers around in Jasprit Bumrah, our absolute stunning pace trio. Plus throw in, old Gary there, who we haven't even mentioned, and, such a dangerous option and piece for us. And he just keeps on keeping on. So many great things to look forward to. And maybe the future of Australian cricket with Nathan McSweeney there at the top. He potentially shapes as a future captain. So exciting. Can't wait. 5 tests. If my boss asks, yes, I'm definitely still working while the cricket's on.
And let's not forget Travis Head as well. Obviously dominated India in the World Cup final and also the Test Championship final, player of the match in both of them. So great form against India. At the last 5 tests, I think he's averaged something like 24 or 25. So Travis Head will be looking to get back within the runs. And we all know he loves it back in Australia.
Yeah, it certainly does. We can't wait to see it all. We might give you a little bit of a spell so you can get fired up for some more sport a little bit later on. We're going to have a look at the AFL and we're going to dig into some boxing, if you want to call it that, a little later on, mate. Thank you. And we'll have a chat to you shortly. It's now time to get into some round ball action, and the football world continues to roll on. The A-Leagues are in full swing. The men's competition's had a week off with the international break. But someone who hasn't had a week off is our Mr. Consistent, Lachie Avil from Round Ball Australia. Lachie, good to have you back.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, once again, good to see you.
Mate, lots of football stuff happening. We know Asian qualification continues on. Unite round on our doorstep. I know we've been talking about it off air. I'm certainly looking forward to it. Round Ball Australia has certainly some big things happening for Unite round.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually get to meet each other, which is good fun. We've kind of been dispersed around New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia. So most of us are all getting into one place. So yeah, it should be good fun.
Certainly should. I've got a couple of the guys getting involved in some of the creator content. They both got drafted against each other. So there's a nice rivalry going on with a couple of the, I was going to call them stars, but I don't want to give them big egos just yet.
Yeah, no. I mean, Jacob hasn't played football in competitive football in 10 years or something and got picked in the 3rd round or something, and Will was down the bottom. So he's not too happy about that. So no, it's good that they got drafted on opposite teams so they get to play against each other. It'll be good fun.
Looking forward to that. We'll get to Unite round in a moment. Let's look at the A-League women's competition. They had round 3 across the weekend. There was plenty to come out of it. A few of the storylines. Wellington continued woes. Perth, they're struggling as well. Melbourne Victory, though, they absolutely dominated. A big win, 4-1 over Western United, which sees them as the pace setters. Sydney got a 1-0 win over Western Sydney. But the one thing that's persistent, Lachie, and I know you haven't seen these yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing your response to them, is some absolute screamers. Let's start with that Brisbane game. Let's have a look at Tamar Levin. This is her first ever A-Leagues goal.
Blissett finds a pass through the lines. Early long shot over the top. Tamar Levin! It's spectacular!
Yeah, that's a decent effort from range, isn't it? Jeez.
How is that for your first A-Leagues goal? Absolutely killing it. And Brisbane Roar, they're starting to... I don't think a lot of people had high hopes for them in the off-season. They were sort of still thinking they were going to be a mid-table team. So they're starting to get some results. Admittedly, that was against a Perth team that is very much struggling and are now firmly in the sights of the wooden spoon.
Yeah, they are. But like the win against Sydney FC last week was big as well. So, Perth probably is not, the result it may seem, but definitely that one against Sydney is. And Brisbane is definitely one of those teams that doesn't have, they have a few really key players, but in terms of their starting 11, it's not completely star-studded. So a bit of a mixed bag of opportunities, but they definitely seem to start the season well.
Yeah, they look like Canberra. They might be one of the smokies in the competition. A team that, again, probably not that highly rated, but got their first win on the weekend was the Newcastle Jets. And again, it wasn't her first A-League goal for this player, but she's the reigning goal of the year holder, Cassidy Davis. Her fourth goal, I think it took her 8.5 seasons to get her first goal. She now got 4 in the last 2 years. And this one, she admitted to me doing the ground announcing afterwards that it was a cross. I think I would have just claimed it. But again, stunner from range from Cass Davis.
Odense Bowl Club Q of the Kavind DM Liga. Gia Vicari. Number 23. Oh, got a touch in! That's gone all the way through to the net!
Yeah, it takes a bit of the shine off it when you claim it as a cross, doesn't it? But she's got to be careful, Cass Davis, because you're right. She had a really long streak of games played for the Jets as well. And then she scored the absolute rocket from distance last year. And obviously she hit it too hard because she went out with a broken toe or something the next week. So she's got to be careful hitting those from range because she's going to hurt herself.
She certainly does. Well, she's making a habit of it now. Her goal of the year last year was from outside the box as well. So she'll be putting her name up in lights for that, and great to see. An interesting one with Wellington. They've had a tough start to the year. They haven't yet scored from open play, as you call it. They had an own goal that went their way and then a penalty in the first game. They haven't scored the last 2. But more concerning, if you're the Wellington team, 0 shots on target.
Yeah, that's not a fun stat for any team. And it's unfortunate for Wellington and Paul Temple. He's been doing some good stuff with that team, but they found it really hard to put a consistent season together. Last year they started really hot, and then they towered away maybe when the travel stacked up a little bit, and they found it really difficult to see a full season through. And if you're going to start from this platform of not just 3 losses, but 0 points, 0 shots, as you said, on target, it's going to be really tough for them.
It certainly is. One positive light for them is Carolina Vlau, their goalkeeper. We did see, obviously, she got chipped there by Cass Davis when she wasn't expecting it. But outside of that, she was absolutely stunning. The Newcastle Jets could not find a way past her outside of that miracle from Cass Davis, and they had plenty of chances. So defensively, they're looking pretty solid, and they haven't conceded a lot of goals in their last 2 games, certainly just 1-0 in each of those. So maybe defence builds it, but they're going to need to find something at the front. That is for sure as we head towards what is going to be an exciting Unite round. It'll be interesting to see what they can conjure, and hopefully they can turn things around. And I guess that's probably a nice segue for us, Lachie, to move to Unite round. Let's start with the women's and talk about the big news that's broken early this week, only a few days out from Unite round. The women's games have been moved from Leichhardt. We saw the surface didn't look great. It played okay in that Sydney derby last week.
Yeah, it certainly didn't look great, and we were talking earlier. Apparently, there's been some more word on it in the last 24, 48 hours or so, and the league was considering moving it because of the playing conditions as well. They actually had to play 6 games of football on it. So, look, it's not a great thing that we're having to change venues so close to the weekend, but I think the resounding consensus is that it's actually not a terrible they're not going about it in a terrible way, right? They're giving free access to everyone. So essentially, Unite Round for the Women's League is now a free access event, which is great. I know that will hurt the APL a little bit, but considering the venue shift, that was probably the right thing to do. So under bad circumstances, the APL have probably done all that they can do. They've given as much notice as they possibly can. It's going to frustrate people who have perhaps planned accommodation out in that side of town. It's not exactly in the same location as where Leichhardt Oval is. So there's that difficulty. But yeah, free access, all of the activations and stuff like that will be carried over, and now you get in for free. So, it's not ideal, but at least the APL are doing the right things.
Yeah, look, I think their hand's been forced. I think, could it have been done a little better? Yes. Could they have had a look at this a little earlier? Possibly. They've made the hard decision now, as you say. We've seen it with lots of these, activities when we've had, I think the Super Rugby had Super Round, NRL's got Magic Round, AFL's got Gather Round. I think we're running out of names for these, so I don't know what to do with the basketball or someone does it. But we've seen how pitches do get churned, so you need to have it, in pretty good condition. As you said, there are some positives: free entry, a little bit better public transport access as well. We know that the train line from Central runs right to Carlton, so for people trying to get from the city, if you're staying in the city, it's close to the airport. So there are some silver linings. There's always going to be some bumps and bruises along the way, but here's hoping we get bigger crowds and it turns into the spectacle that we deserve, because we know that crowds was probably the Achilles heel of Unite Round last year.
Yeah, of course. And obviously, by the way Unite Round came about, it wasn't exactly this organic concept that was field tested and, went through all the surveys and focus groups. It was just kind of got thrown on us. So they've really had to think on their feet, the APL, in terms of putting this event together last year. But this year they've had a lot more time and a lot more thought. And this is a bit of a late curveball, but they seem to have adapted well. So, yeah, hopefully it still puts on a good show.
I'm certainly looking forward to it. As we touched on earlier, round ball getting together 1, but 2, 12 games of football in the one city. And again, it's probably a silver lining too. There's lots of situations where if they'd had this in other cities, and this might be an argument that some people in Sydney might use, you may not have had another ground that was up to that standard in terms of just being able to shift it so quickly to Cogra.
Yeah, and after this week, it's going to be a really interesting topic of conversation as to, number one, if Unite Round stays around, and number 2, do we stay in Sydney or do we go somewhere else? And I think particularly for that reason, also just because you have so many New South Wales clubs, it would be a tough ask, I think, to move Unite Round out of Sydney in its current form, maybe 5 to 10 years down the line. If we hopefully have a good run of years in the A-League and the crowds and the supportership builds with it, then maybe there's another town. It'd probably have to have more than one team, probably Adelaide and Brisbane. Maybe you're thinking that couldn't quite be enough, which only really leaves Melbourne, right? So it's very tricky. It's not like we have the same support as an NRL or an AFL to really put Unite Round out to tender to different state governments and get a really attractive bidding war against each other. But hopefully they can do their best. And yeah, in isolation, the Unite Round isn't a bad idea, right? It's just the way it came about was a bit odd in the A-League. So yeah, hopefully it's a good event.
It certainly was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. It'll be interesting to see too, obviously expansion, a key topic in the A-League. Does that then format, we start to get to 7 or potentially 8 games, and obviously this is some way down the track, but we only need one more men's team for 7 games. We start to get to a point then with time slots and overlaps and loading up grounds that it's going to be really hard. So do they go down the route? We've seen the NRL this week have announced that NRLW Magic Ground will be in Newcastle, and obviously that's a place that's close to my heart. But is that something that we look at and, potentially say that, the women's and the men's, and I understand the whole concept of Unite, but maybe that's something they need to consider explore as well, either having them in different locations or on, different weekends, all sorts of different things that I'm sure the APL is considering at the moment and is part of their future plans, or you'd at least hope that was part of their future plans, something they'd considered.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a bit of a litmus test for that kind of idea, right? Because you do have, unlike last year, the men's at one venue and the women's at the other. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we looked through the fixtures, no one team's men's and women's team are playing on the same days. So you do actually have the opportunity to see both the men's and the women's sides. And it will be interesting to see whether people do opt to do that, or you have, more bolted on fans in the men's league or the women's league, and how those viewership trends kind of go. And then that would, be able to inform a decision like that.
Certainly, we'll watch this space. In terms of watching this space, let's have a look at how the fixtures line up for Unite Round. As we said, 12 games across 2 stadiums in Sydney. We're really looking forward to, I guess, how this shapes up. Taking a look at the men's, what is it that really catches your eye in terms of the fixtures and what you're looking forward to?
I mean, it's the Sydney Derby. It is. And you got the F3 on Friday night as well. Selfishly, I'm very excited to go to both of those 2 games because I've never been in an F3 or a Sydney Derby before. So I'm really looking forward to those experiences. But from what we've heard, Douglas Costa is returning to fitness. Hopefully he's in line for a start. Juan Mata and his place in the Western Sydney Wanderers team has been a big topic of conversation recently. Does he start on the bench? Does he have a spot in the starting 11? Personally, I think absolutely. He's one of the best players in the world, full stop. And yes, he might not have the fitness and physicality, but apparently he's good to run out 90 minutes. And it's more about, how they find a space for him. They've tried him up the field. That didn't really work too well. Playing him as a kind of ball playing 6 is probably the preferred option. That's what's been talked about now. He's come off the bench for the Wanderers. He actually had a trial game or maybe practice game against the Australia under-23s during the international break. The Wanderers played them and he played in that game as well. So hopefully they've kind of sorted out where he fits in that side and we get to see Douglas against Mata from the outs, 11v11 to start the game, which we didn't get in round 1 either. So yeah, that's obviously the showpiece, but some nice fixtures around it as well.
Yeah, I really like the little Kiwi taste to Sunday as well. Both clashes are top 6 clashes as well. So you've kind of got something there. And again, I don't want to take away from those other 2 games. But you've got something there that ties in certainly some New South Wales flavour, some New Zealand flavour. And we know that there's been a push for, some New Zealand travelling fans from things that we've seen in the media. So, looking forward to what it's going to promise. And, I think they've done really well with getting that balance of good matches without just trying to load it with derbies and getting a bit of a mix there. So really excited to look forward to the men's and looking forward to Newcastle knocking off Central Coast and getting some bragging rights. I know that is very optimistic.
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of the fixture, the only other thing you would say is, I know when I saw this when the fixture list came out for the entire season, if you wanted to squeeze in one kind of more really heavy rivalry, maybe an original rivalry with Melbourne Victory versus Adelaide, and the key point there would be that Brisbane playing Adelaide and Wellington playing Victory, they're now the teams that they play 3 times this year rather than 2 because you get a couple of those bonus ones. So by not having an original rivalry in this round, we only get 2 instead of 3 for the season. So we're settling for 2, but also, do you really want to waste an original rivalry on neutral territory? I don't know. So you can swing either way, but yeah, you got the 2 big ones with the F3 and the Sydney Derby, and I think that'll be okay. We'll make do with those.
Yeah, I certainly think we will. It's going to be exciting, the men's. Let's take a switch and have a look at how the women's games line up that are now at Cogra Oval, starting with some Friday night activity. And what catches your eye here?
I mean, there's a grand final rematch with Sydney against Melbourne City, which is obviously going to be a big one. The Mariners against Victory. There was history in that matchup from last season. Casey Dumont, of course, released by Victory, went to the Mariners and then eliminated Victory in a penalty shootout. So there'll be a little bit of bite in that one as well. But of course, we're still early in both seasons, but even for the women's, we're super early still in round 4. So teams will be, trying to still establish themselves in the league and really prove that they're there to be competitive. So, obviously the grand final rematch, that final game, the 2 Sky Blue, City Blue, whatever you want to call it, that's definitely the big one.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's some intentional programming from the APL. We know that we're going to get a bit of football fatigue come the end of the weekend as well. The 2 New Zealand sides in action in the men's means there's probably not going to be as much focus from, dyed-in-the-wool football fans, whereas some of them might actually take that chance to the grand final rematch. The other one, again, we know where my biases lay, but Newcastle, West United coming off that loss to Victory, Newcastle coming off their first win, and remembering that Newcastle were the team that eliminated Western United somewhat surprisingly last season. So there's a little bit there too. I know that's been talked about between some of the players and the coaching staff from little whispers I'm hearing out of it. There's a bit of chat going off the field, which you like to see sort of happening across the league. And I think that really gives to that feeling of the women's league building into a much more consistent league where, we know the men's league, the players are crossing paths, etc. We're seeing a lot more of that, but it's really got its own legs now, the A-League W.
Absolutely. And, people often talk about how you grow kind of history and, the real kind of passion and fire for teams and in the A-League. And unfortunately, the probably the most true answer is you just have to wait a little while, right? And it's good that we have these stories like the Jets and Western, like the Mariners and Victory, that there's history now and people remember that history and you want to get a leg back over one another. So, it's really good that that's starting to shine through. Of course, the Jets, no Serena Bolden this time around, so you don't have that leg to stand on. But yeah, sure to be an entertaining contest.
We look forward to it. Well, Lachie, thank you as always. Looking forward to getting face to face with the Round Ball Australia crew. Of course, if you want to catch up on all of what's happening in Round Ball action, get a bit more in depth, head to the Round Ball Australia podcast, the Dub podcast as well. That's part of that, and Round Ball Australia website. Mate, look forward to unpacking all of Unite Round and hopefully what is an enthralling success next week.
Absolutely. Can't wait, mate.
Well, we move from the round ball to the round wheels, and it is time to dig into the F1. And who else would we bring on but the man that pulls the ones and the twos? JR, welcome back. We've got you on camera this week, mate. You're making your glorious return. Where are you coming to us from?
Mate, Vegas, baby. We are in Vegas this week. Just looking at the site of my last trip to Vegas many years ago. That's the big news this week. Coming into Vegas round, Max Verstappen can win the World Championship from here if Lando chokes. Lando will most likely choke. So let's leave that there. But the big news, as we went to record last week, there was some breaking news in that Kick Sauber has decided to drop both Valtteri and Zhou Guanyu for the 2025 season.
That's huge news. Obviously, Valtteri's been one of the fixtures of the grid for a while now. He's spent a bit of time now at Kick, but what's that mean for the future for these two?
Look, for Zhou Guanyu, first Chinese driver in Formula One history, I don't know what it means for him at this stage. I don't see him returning to the sport at any time. Valtteri at this stage looks like he's linking up with Mercedes in a back-of-house role, so possibly working under Toto Wolff himself. So that's sort of where his future is. His social media has been pretty lively during the week. There's been a bit of a what's next campaign, which has been a bit of fun to see. But yeah, we'll see what happens through next. As for where Valtteri leads the Formula One Championship, we do have to talk about the fact he is currently 23rd in a 20-driver championship. And there's drivers who aren't in the sport anymore who are ahead of him. Questions about the end of his career probably got his time at Kick is probably tainted it a little bit. Had some great results at Mercedes, but this is no way for him to go out.
It's not a way for him to go out. I know you and I have talked about this off air, and we've both got a bit of a combined wish that he and Danny Rick team up and make some sort of, Drive to Survive uncut. Just some raw behind-the-scenes footage. How good would it be? It'd
be amazing. Just the banter between the two of them. Like, Valtteri is the honorary Australian, with him currently dating an Australian Olympian. So he's certainly welcome here. So the more of what we see of Valtteri on social media, I think the better.
Look, the Chris Macpherson show is happy to put out an offer of, a percentage revenue share because that's all the money we've got to let them loose on the F1 paddock because, yeah, I'd love to see the two of them. Either of them by themselves would be hilarious. I just think that the dynamic they would have, Valtteri with that little bit drier piece and Danny Rick with just the gregarious out there personality that he is, could be absolutely huge. I don't think it's what we're going to see, but the great thing is it sounds like neither of those two will be lost to the sport as we go forward. So, really exciting. Looking forward to seeing where they land. And I know there's going to be, as we get to this sort of fun time of the season, not only the championship to sort out, JR, but there's always going to be lots more news over the coming weeks as things iron out as to who sits in what seats, both driving and non, heading into 2025 as well.
Yeah, so the 2025 driver rosters all look pretty well wrapped up at this stage, with the exception there's still that second Red Bull seat. So whether Perez survives the year, we're going to find that out probably in the next few weeks.
Well, certainly exciting. The other piece is that we know that the 2025 calendar dropped as well. Not a lot to talk about there, really. So we'll leave that as said because it lines up very much with 2024. But we'll turn our eyes to Las Vegas. Hopefully they've managed to strap down the manhole covers and get us ready for the race this time around. Max has got the chance to seal the title, as you said. Let's see how Lando finds in his own peculiar, special way to choke in this race.
Absolutely. I look very much forward to him going on pole again and him not being in the lead by the end of the first corner.
We look forward to it. Thank you very much, JR Carter. We head from the motorsport in Vegas to the AFL. It's a while away before the season happens, but it's certainly starting to heat up, and we welcome back the man from the Third Man Up podcast, Brody Burrows. Brody, I know you guys are in the off season of the podcast at the moment, a well-deserved breather for you and the Great Spider. But, mate, we had to have a chat about this. The schedule's just dropped.
Yeah, it has. And look, if you're a fan of anyone, then you think your team's been robbed. I think you hear the talkback stations, mate, and everyone thinks their team's been hard done by, even if you go for Carlton, who got an absolute favourable draw. But anyway, I think it's, look, you have years, you're going to have good, I suppose good schedules and bad schedules, but at the same time, as Ross Lyon says, you've got to be an anywhere team, beat anyone, anywhere, anytime.
Mate, at the end of the day, I'm a North Melbourne fan, so every draw is rough on us at the moment. Anyway, bring on Luke Parker, Caleb Daniel, and Jack Darling. They'll solve all of our problems. And, in terms of, obviously, there's some big talking points. There's always the rigmarole around, as you said. Our team got a tough draw. Carlton got an easy draw. Essendon got lots of Friday night games. Seems weird to say that a team that can't win finals gets lots of Friday night games. But anyway, that's a whole other story for another day. But a couple of the talking points, obviously, opening round is back. The AFL are really using this push. We know the NRL going and doing their Las Vegas thing, trying to find the open window and a Queensland, New South Wales push, as we saw last year. We see it again this year. The Collingwood fans and the Essendon fans in particular are up in arms because they've got to go and play Gold Coast and GWS away in early March. For me, and we all know that my first love is rugby league. AFL's still up there though. I just love that the footy season extends for another weekend. Like the more we can string it out, the better. I mean, too much sport's never enough.
No, I'm fully with you on this one, Chris. And I think the way a lot of teams have really got to think about it, and especially just back to the schedule for one moment, is let's think this time last year, people were complaining that other teams had 2 games against Hawthorn at the start of last season. By the end of it, no one wanted to play Hawthorn twice. So I think before teams got to, have a look at that, we've got to play this team twice, just wait and see how the year pans out. Teams jump, teams dive. I mean, if you had Melbourne twice last year, you would have been spitting chips. But by the end of the season, you would have been stoked. So just wait and see until the end of the year before you start complaining. But yeah, opening round, I'm fully with you on this one. More footy, spread over more weeks, the better for me. No double up games, so you can sit down, get a slab, and just watch some footy 4 days in a row.
Yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to it. And to be fair, each of these matchups, last year I wasn't as pumped about all the matchups. This year I actually quite like each of these. Obviously, Brisbane, defending premiers, up against Geelong, who, went deep into the season. Sydney, they're playing Hawthorn. We know Hawthorn's on the rise. Sydney have had some players leave, some different things happening there, so it'll be interesting to see what strength they've got. Gold Coast Essendon's an interesting one. They're both teams that know how to choke at the wrong times of their seasons. And then GWS and Collingwood. This is kind of, it's a weird, this is built into a bit of a rivalry, I feel, this game, for some weird reason. Like, GWS doesn't really have any natural rivals outside of Sydney. But them and Collingwood, I think, ties back to they've played in a couple of bigger games and a couple of key games when they've both had things on the line. So I think this is a nice little way to wrap it up.
Yeah, fully agreed. GWS and Collingwood, and GWS and Western Bulldogs, it's the rivalries that have sort of come out of nowhere. Maybe it started with a few digs on a banner one day, and it's just sort of blown up since then. But yeah, I think the matchups they've got absolutely right. Love the Brisbane and Geelong one to kick off the season. The reigning premiers, I think they should kick off the season no matter when it is, every single year, whether it's Collingwood, whether it's Crows, whether it's North Melbourne, whether it's GWS. The reigning premiers need to kick off the season. I think it's just great for them, and great publicity and reward.
It'll be interesting, actually. I like that thought. I don't know how you go about it if they continue with this opening round piece, because you probably want them kicking off at home. But at the end of the day, ideally, they kick off at home. But maybe you just work with them to have an away game, make sure they're in action, because that's the storyline then, right? It's the reigning premiers. I think if you can get a big matchup for them as well. But we'll wait and see. As we said, hats off. I'm going to doff my cap here. I'm always happy to do a drive-by on governing bodies, but I'm doffing my cap to the AFL here. Well done on opening round. The other big piece for the AFL is obviously gather round. We were talking about this when we dug into the football earlier. We've got Unite round coming up for the A-Leagues. There's Unite round, there's gather round, there's Super round, there's Magic round. It's all happening. There's rounds everywhere. People are making fun of it, but at the end of the day, if an idea is good, just copy it and run with it. And the AFL have done that. They've executed it really well. I am still waiting to organise to get myself to a gather round, especially because North Melbourne is one of the lowest drawing teams, always gets sent to the Barossa, which is a really horrible place to go for a weekend. But What are your thoughts here? No surprises. Adelaide opening up, Port Adelaide closing. Again, Geelong the headline at the opener. Again, we know they draw. Hawthorn closing it out. That'll be a really good game, Port and Hawthorn, I think. There's some other interesting matches here, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. There's a couple of games that jump out. Collingwood Sydney will be a cracker as well. But what are your takeaways?
Yeah, look, Gather Round's just been amazing. I think it's been one of the best initiatives that the AFL's brought in for 10, 20 years, if you ask me. The one thing I look at this fixture and I think, what is the AFL doing? And that's the Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn. If you're going to find Ken Hinkley for that little outburst at the end and then use that for marketing to just bookend Gather Round, I mean, you can't have both AFL. Like, seriously, pick one or the other. But, yeah, this is going to be super exciting, mate. I know what you mean about the Barossa. I've been stuck there for a couple of weddings, and I think I'm still getting over the hangover 2 years later. It's the wine is absolutely beautiful. And, yeah, look, a few years ago, I had the pleasure to work at Gather Round, and I was at Norwood Oval, and it was Fremantle up against Gold Coast, and Gold Coast were up all game and 4 goals at three-quarter time, and Freo hit back at the end as a Freo supporter. In the media stand, I was, trying to keep myself a little bit composed, and we're in the press conference little room after the game, and Justin Longmuir comes in and did his piece, and then Stewie Jew rolls in, and this was at the time a few murmurs were sort of starting to happen around Stewie Jew's job, and down there at the Norwood Oval, it wasn't they don't have a press room. It was actually the Norwood president's office, and you can imagine it's about a 4x4 room, little square room. And he was on one side, and one journalist to sit there and ask him and said, "Oh, are you worried about getting sacked and Damien Hardwick, potentially coming up to the Gold Coast?" And nothing had been announced at this stage, and you should have felt this room, mate. It's like all the air just got immediately taken out. Stewie Jew just got up and walked out. I've never, ever been so scared for someone's life. Like, the look that he shot this reporter, I thought he was going to kill him.
Would have been a good exclusive for you, bros. If front row witness to a journalist being strangled by his own recording cord.
Yeah, first ever time in a press conference, and would have had to be a witness. Would have been great.
Yeah, that's a big one to ask when you're away from home, in a very tight and tense quarters after a tough loss. But anyway, that's why the journos get the big bucks, mate. They ask the hard-hitting questions. But yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to it. And hey, look, in terms of there's not many winnable games for North Melbourne next year, so this one's possibly one that I can look forward to.
Yeah, it's just a great weekend all around. I mean, the best thing about Adelaide is everything's close. Like, you're not going to have to sit on a tram or a train for an hour unless you sort of in those country areas. If you're in Norwood or wherever it is, and Adelaide Oval, the ground itself, you can play 3 days of footy there. If it's raining, it drains really well. It doesn't get dug up, so you're not going to have those fears like you are with some other grounds. You know it's going to be well attended. I just can't wait for it.
Certainly great to see utilising the grounds around as well. There's some wonderful picturesque spots, and that Barossa game, that's what it's always great for, right? Heading out to Nuri there and getting the scenery in. And, we love that when, it's like the old tests in Hobart, a bit of Bell Reeve magic, the Derwent in the background. Just a bit of picturesque is never a bad thing. So it brings back a bit of nostalgia. But certainly looking forward to it. As we said, we'll get back into a bit more AFL later in the season. Before we go, mate, there's one thing I want to just pick your brain on. As a rugby league tragic, flexible scheduling, right? We've got the first 2/3 of the season scheduled. One of the few sports that actually openly flexibly schedules such a large portion. I know the NFL do a little bit at the back end of their season. Most of the other Australian sporting codes tend to have it all set in terms of an Australian tradition. What are your thoughts? What's the logic and the reasoning? Is it all about what TV wants?
Yeah, I think it comes down to money in the end. And it comes down as to, the AFL like to, if you act in a certain way like Ken Hinkley did, that's that the AFL, hasn't organised themselves, they'll fine you. But the AFL love to weave their own little storylines and then profit off them. Like, we know it's a little bit WWE-like the way the AFL likes to fixture this last round. And if there's, maybe an old coach retiring or something against his old team, or that'll then get put on a Friday night instead of people who are actually competing, they'll just push that to the Sunday. And we saw it last year. It worked really well with Fremantle playing Port in the final game, and Fremantle had to win that to make the 8. And I think it was Carlton that were, holding on for dear life in the 8 at that stage. So in some ways, I'm really for it. Some ways, I do understand the fans' frustration who, they want to book their accommodation early in the year, and then because we know what the airlines are currently like at the moment, as soon as they see it, it's just going to get jacked up. So I'm in both camps, sitting on the fence, mate, well and truly.
Splinters in your ass, mate. That's what's going to happen.
Exactly right.
It's an interesting one. And as the, traditional AFL fan base spreads more, we've got a lot of fans who are interstate to their teams. Just ask North Melbourne. We're going to play in WA for home games. Anyway, that's a sore point, as you can tell. I much prefer Tasmania. But in terms of it is a challenge. I don't think there's a perfect solution. I mean, you can jag the right result. Look at the NRL. They got spoon bowl in the last round last year. That worked out perfectly for them. But yeah, I don't know what the solution is. I think they need to get a little bit further in advance, though, and just hedge their bets. But as you say, if they had scheduled Melbourne versus Brisbane for the, let's just say that was a game in the last round, and then put that as their Thursday or Friday night game heading into the finals. By the time we get to the finals, everyone's sitting there going, "Oh, Melbourne's actually shit now." Like happened, and it's those pieces, but. That's the challenge. I guess there's no perfect answer, but it gives us something to talk about, which is great. But again, as always, mate, thank you. We look forward to being able to tune back into Third Man Up in the season when you're ripping and roaring again. In the meantime, we've got the draft happening, which is going to be very exciting in the next week or so. If there's any key takeaways or talking points, we'll get back together and recap that. But for the meantime, enjoy the off-season. Let's focus on some cricket from an AFL point of view, but we might take a little bit of a breather. And I know there's something else that's on your chest that you need to talk about. So we might just let you just take a breath and we might come back and talk about some biff, mate.
Oh, we'll try.
Well, we sent Brody Burrows out the back. He's had the trainer with the ice packs on his shoulders, cooling him down before he lets loose in the final round as it is. We're digging into the boxing now, Broads. Come on back in. You're primed to go. Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. Fast or furor?
Mate, absolute farce. I've called this the whole time going in. The fact that the Texas Athletic State Commission, they allowed this to happen. It was a 58-year-old man. It would have got turned down in 49 other states. Like, in all seriousness, this should have never been allowed to happen. Anyone who knew boxing knew this was going to happen. Like, Mike Tyson, yeah, he might have had one or two good rounds in him, but you could see in the days leading up, he wasn't Mike Tyson. Like, you could hear it in the interviews. Like, he was still trying to maintain this for viewers, but it wasn't Mike Tyson. Anyone who's had the pleasure of going back and watching footage, it's not Mike Tyson. It is so frustrating as a boxing and martial arts fan to go and see this absolute joke. I understand what it is, but it's not boxing. It is entertainment.
I think that's the thing, and I think you and I have talked about this in other elements off air previously. It's like the rugby league and AFL players when they come in and fight. And look, there's some of them that have started to make a transition where there's one or two of them that I'm happy to doff my cap. Anthony Mundine's probably the one that jumps to mind where you say, look, they're boxers now. But for most part of it, these are entertainment in the same way that WWE is the UFC, right? Like it's a different code, if you will. The real thing we all need to understand is the purpose of this, and that was to line. I was going to say two individuals, but there's a few other people as well, but predominantly to line a small group of people's pockets via putting on some entertainment. And to be fair, it was fittingly on Netflix, a place that doesn't do sport.
Yeah, and we saw what happened halfway through the fight when everything started buffering, or on I think it was Mike's walkout when everything went down. The only thing that was probably worth watching out of the whole fight. But the thing that annoyed me is no one really tuned in before it, and they missed one of the best women's fights nearly ever. And the last time these two fought, Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, it was a draw in Madison Square Garden, and it was labelled as one of the best women's boxing matches in history. And they've put them, as the co-main event to this, but I don't think it got. It needed to be market higher. The other boxers on this card. And, I mean, you saw Barrios in the fight even before that, and that was such an entertaining fight. And then you've just gotten hyped and more hyped seeing two great boxing matches, and then you saw this, and it was just atrocious for me. And I think it's a slap in the face to boxers. And I know Jake Paul, he actually does a good job, obviously advocating for money or equal money for men and women in boxing and in martial arts as well. But it's a farce, mate. It's just so frustrating as a boxing fan seeing this get the worldwide attention that it did.
Yeah, I for one, I knew. Well, obviously, you can never say you knew what was coming with a boxing fight, but with the Serrano fight, I had high hopes that was going to be a really good fight, right? Like, and I talked to a lot of people about it. I said, at the end of the day, this is a really good fight. That's a co-main event in a big card from a publicity point of view, not from a fight quality point of view, and it's on free to air. If you're a Netflix subscriber, let's be honest, nearly everyone in Australia is. It's essentially free to air, or as close to that we get in this day and age. I shouldn't call it free to air because it is a subscription model, but you're not paying $60 for a pay-per-view to see this as a co-main event in some other boxing fight. Like, and the amount of people that got there and, they tuned in at 3:00 just as that finished. For the sake of 15 minutes or so, you could have seen an absolutely enthralling fight. There was other fights on the card, as you said. The most disappointing fight of it all was the one that was predicted to be by anyone who knew what they were talking about. It exactly went to script. 2-minute rounds, 60 seconds plus of clinching, hugging, catching your breath in each round. There was very little actual action once you got past the first 2 rounds. There is talk from some quarters, and I hope to goodness that it's not correct, that these two might look for another cash grab. And I just say that Texas needs to have a look at what those other 49 states were doing.
Yeah, and go back and look at Mike Tyson's heat map in this one. He did not move from the center of the ring. He couldn't chase. We saw an early flurry in round 1, but he couldn't chase. His knee was stuffed. He's 58 years old. Like, if I'm still walking...
Professional debut 12 years before Jake Paul was born.
Yeah. And let's not forget, he hasn't lived an easy life. He's not just been knocked out, but everything else he's put his body and mind through for the last, 40 years. I think it's insulting to boxing fans, and that's as far as I'll go with this.
Yeah, I think my summary on it too is it diminishes, and I know some people say it doesn't, but it does diminish, and he needs to be protected from himself a little bit. It diminishes from his legacy. That's not Iron Mike. That's not Kid Dynamite. One of the greatest heavyweights of all time. And this is what anyone who's less than 30 is going to remember him for.
Yeah. And think of all these, young kids from the age of maybe 15 to 30 who they've heard from their dads how much of this killer Mike Tyson was growing up. And then this YouTube star they've grown up watching who was on the Disney Channel 10 years ago just went and beat him in a fight. Like, it's so frustrating. They need to save him from himself. And if anyone else allows Mike Tyson to fight again, there's clearly money under the table. It was an absolute joke. Yeah,
it's bordering on criminal negligence at that point. I think we also need to delineate, as we said, entertainment from boxing, come up with another name for it, codify it somewhat else. I don't know what the exact solution is, call it celebrity prize fighting. I don't care what you call it because that's essentially what it is. But we've voiced our displeasure, mate. But unfortunately for a lot of boxing and martial arts fans, that took the headlines on the weekend when it shouldn't have.
Nah, absolutely not. Like UFC 309 on Sunday, it was brilliant. It was a brilliant card. The main event, John Jones. There's been so much talk. Him coming up against Stipe Miocic, an absolute great in the heavyweight division in the UFC. Former champion. 42 years of age, but has not looked at whatsoever. He can take a punch to the face, and it was eventually just John Jones just attacking his midriff. Got him with a spinning kick that would have put down an elephant, I think John Jones said in the press conference afterwards. And if you saw it, you could just about see a couple of ribs just go straight away. And it was a fantastic card. Michael Chandler and Charles Du Bronx, they call him. Brilliant fight. Du Bronx just absolutely dominating for 4 rounds, and then Chandler just deciding to do what Michael Chandler does and just throw caution to the wind and go a bit crazy in the final round. He was on his back there at one stage, and he just stood up with him and jumped with him on his back. It is probably one of the funniest things, but 5 rounds of someone laying on you for 20 minutes and you still got the fitness and the strength to stand up with probably an extra 90 kilos on your back from the ground and do it twice in a row in the final 30 seconds. It was simply phenomenal, and that was a great fight. And you could just go down the card. Bo Nickel's probably the one exception. They've hyped him up to Chimaev, and he nothing like it. If he goes in the cage with him at the moment, he'll be eaten alive. So he's got a bit of work to do. despite getting a points win. But yeah, that was a great card. I think the UFC really, really showing boxing how professional sport should be done.
The irony of that statement in itself, considering the early days of how UFC was viewed versus boxing at the time, when boxing probably had its relative stuff together, we'll say. Always a relative term with boxing and any fighting organisation. But yeah, a great card and a great another win for a guy who will more than likely by the end of his career go down as one of the best in the big weight divisions in terms of John Bones Jones.
As the greatest UFC fighter of all time for me. I think he's got 2 fights left in his career. Next one will probably be Tom Aspinall, the interim heavyweight champion at the moment. And then I think the best way for him to finish his career will be Alex Pereira, going to be a 3-weight division champion. He'll move up to heavyweight, and I think that'll be John Jones. If he beats him, there is no one left in the UFC for him to beat. And I think if he wins these next 2, he will go down as the greatest fighter of all time.
Well, there you've heard it. John Bones Jones to be the ultimate GOAT of UFC within a matter of time. Rhodes, as always, you're Mr. Consistent. You're across all of these sporting events. You just made versatility to the max, and we appreciate it. Look forward to digging into a few of your other sporting wheelhouses as the weeks go on over this summer of sport.
Thanks, mate. No more boxing fights, and we should be all good.
Well, thanks to Brody Burrows, wrapping up all of the Biffs in the AFL. It was great to pull apart a couple of his favourite sports with him. He's very much across all of the landscape, and we love that. A big thanks as well to JR Carter, our man on the 1s and 2s, as well as our resident motorsport guru and our regular Mr. Consistent, Mr. Reliable, Lachie Avil, coming in, pinch hitting with the round ball action. It's been a huge show. Been great to have you all tuning in and watching us on YouTube. As always, dig into the comments. Let us know what other sports you'd like to see us cover, what else you'd like to hear, other storylines you'd like to see involved. We're always happy to take on board some feedback. Thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to bringing you some more Chris Macpherson Show. Episode 007 will come to you next week.